Harold Jenkins hadn't worn his good suit in over a decade. It hung in the back of his closet like a memory, pressed, wrapped in plastic, and smelling faintly of mothballs and cedar. But today he needed it. He'd washed his face twice, combed what little gray hair he had left, and polished his old work boots until they almost shone. They still bore the scars of a lifetime in the fields, mud stains that wouldn't come out, scuffs from fence posts, and the deep creases of a man who'd walked more miles than most people drive. He climbed into his pickup truck just after sunrise, the engine coughing to life like an old friend clearing his throat. The drive from his farm to the city was long, 3 hours through winding back roads, past sleeping towns, and over bridges that hummed beneath his tires. Harold didn't mind the quiet. Out here, silence wasn't empty. It was full of birdsong, wind through wheat, and the soft creak of trees. But the city? The city was different. It buzzed with noise he didn't understand. Honking horns, flashing signs, people rushing like they were being chased. He wasn't going to buy anything fancy. He wasn't even sure he belonged in the place he was headed, but he had a promise to keep. Years ago, his wife had received a gift, a small, elegant watch with a silver band, and a face so delicate it looked like it could tell time in dreams. It came from a cousin she barely knew, someone who'd struck it rich in the city and thought a luxury timepiece would make up for decades of silence. She'd never worn it. "Too fine for my hands," she'd said, tucking it away in a velvet box. But she'd kept it safe like a secret treasure. When she passed, Harold found it in her jewelry drawer, wrapped in tissue paper, still pristine. Now, with bills piling up and the well running low, Harold figured it was time to let it go. Not because he wanted to, but because the farm needed help more than his memories did. He'd called the store. Maison Éclat, the woman on the phone, had said, her voice crisp and cool like ice water, and they'd told him they might accept a return, depending on condition and provenance. Harold didn't know what provenance meant, but he knew the watch was real, and it was his. The store sat on a street lined with boutiques so clean they looked like museum displays. Cars with foreign names glided past, and people in sharp clothes walked like they owned the sidewalk. Harold parked a block away, suddenly self-conscious. His suit jacket felt tight across the shoulders, and his boots, no matter how much he'd polished them, still looked like they belonged in a barn, not on marble floors. He took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy glass door. Inside, the air smelled like money, clean, cold, and faintly floral. Soft music played, so quiet it was almost a whisper. A few customers browsed glass cases filled with watches that cost more than Harold's truck. He walked slowly toward the counter, the velvet box held gently in both hands like a bird's egg. Behind the counter stood a young woman. She looked no older than 30, with perfectly styled hair and a name tag that read Chloe. Her eyes flicked up as Harold approached, then down, taking in his boots, his rough hands. The way his collar didn't quite lie flat. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice polite but distant, like she was already thinking about her lunch break. "I hope so," Harold said, offering a small smile. "I'd like to return this watch. It's never been worn. Got the original box and everything." He placed the velvet case on the counter. Chloe didn't touch it. She just stared at it, then at him, her expression shifting from polite to skeptical. "This is a Maison Éclat timepiece," she said, as if that explained everything. "These aren't sold at discount outlets." "I know," Harold said gently. "It was a gift. From family. My wife kept it all these years." Chloe crossed her arms. "Returns require proof of purchase. And frankly, sir, this store doesn't usually handle second-hand items from private individuals." Harold blinked. "But I'm not selling it second-hand. I'm returning it to you, the store." "We don't take returns without a receipt," she said, sharper now. "And even if we did, we certainly don't accept items brought in by, well, people who clearly don't shop here." The words landed like stones. Harold felt his face grow warm, but he kept his voice steady. "Ma'am, I've worked this land since I was 16. I've fed families, raised crops through droughts, buried my wife with my own hands. I may not wear fancy clothes, but I've earned every callus on these fingers. And I'm asking politely, can you please just look at the watch?" For a second, she hesitated. Then her eyes narrowed. "Look," she snapped. "We get people like you all the time, thinking they can walk in here with some old trinket and walk out with cash. This isn't a pawn shop." Before Harold could respond, she reached out, not to open the box, but to shove it away in disgust. Her hand struck the velvet case hard, sending it flying off the counter. It hit the floor with a soft thud, the lid popping open. The watch tumbled out, its silver band glinting under the store lights. And then, without warning, she slapped the box again with the back of her hand, as if it were dirty. "Don't waste my time," she said coldly. Harold didn't move. He just stood there, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the watch lying on the polished floor like something discarded. Around him, the store stayed quiet. No one spoke. No one came to help. It was as if the whole room had frozen, watching him shrink. But in the corner, near a plush velvet chair and a low table with art books, a man in a dark coat had seen everything. He hadn't said a word. He hadn't moved. But his eyes, kind, steady, and full of quiet fury, never left Harold. He'd been waiting for a friend, but now he knew his wait had just changed purpose. Harold bent down slowly, knees cracking, and picked up the watch. He closed the box with care, dusted it off with his sleeve, and held it close to his chest. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just turned and walked toward the door, his boots echoing in the silence. But before he reached it, a calm voice behind him said, "Sir." Wait, Harold paused. He didn't know it yet, but his day, and maybe his life, was about to turn in a direction he never expected. The man who called out didn't sound like the others in the store. His voice was low, calm, not loud or showy, just steady, like someone used to speaking only when it mattered. Harold turned slowly, still holding the velvet box against his chest like a shield. He expected another salesperson, maybe someone from security ready to escort him out for causing a scene. But the man walking toward him wasn't in a uniform. He wore a simple black coat, dark jeans, and scuffed boots that looked almost as worn as Harold's own. His face was familiar. Harold had seen it on movie posters at the gas station, or late at night on the TV when he couldn't sleep, but he couldn't place the name right away. What struck Harold most wasn't the fame, though. It was the look in the man's eyes. There was no pity there, no condescension, just quiet concern, like he'd just watched someone kick over a child's sandcastle and felt the unfairness of it deep in his bones. "Are you all right?" the man asked, stopping a few feet away. He didn't reach out or crowd him. He just stood there, giving Harold space. Harold swallowed. His throat felt tight. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice cracked a little. "Just didn't expect to be treated like I brought in trash." The man nodded slowly. "That wasn't right," he said plainly. "Not even close." A silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like the kind of quiet two people share when they both know something wrong has happened, and words aren't needed to agree on it. Inside the store, things had shifted. The young woman behind the counter, Chloe, had gone pale. She'd recognized the man, too. Her hands fluttered nervously near her name tag, and she glanced toward the back office like she was hoping someone would rescue her. A few other staff members had appeared, whispering to each other, eyes wide. The man didn't look at them. He kept his focus on Harold. "My friend works here," he said gently. "In watches." "I was waiting for him, but I saw what happened." He paused. "Would you be willing to sit down for a minute? There's a quiet spot over here. You don't have to talk, but you shouldn't have to leave feeling like that." Harold hesitated. Part of him wanted to just get back in his truck and drive home, forget the whole thing. But another part, the part that missed his wife's voice, the part that had been carrying the weight of the farm alone for too long, felt something loosen in his chest. Maybe it was the kindness. Maybe it was just being seen. He nodded. The man led him to a small seating area near the window, away from the main display cases. 2 armchairs faced each other, with a low table between them. Sunlight streamed in, warm and golden, casting long shadows across the marble floor. It felt almost peaceful, like a little island in the middle of a cold sea. As they sat, a security guard approached quietly. The man spoke to him in a low voice, too soft for Harold to hear, but the guard nodded and moved away without saying a word. No flashing lights, no shouting, just calm coordination. "You know," Harold said after a while, staring at the box in his lap, "I didn't come here to cause trouble. My wife, she kept this watch all these years, never wore it, said it was too fine for her, but she loved that someone thought enough of her to give it." He looked up. "I just wanted to do right by her, turn it into something that could help keep the farm going." The man listened without interrupting. When Harold finished, he didn't offer empty promises or dramatic speeches. He just said, "That's honorable." Then he leaned forward slightly. "This store has a policy, but policies can be wrong. And people in charge can fix them, especially when they see what really happened. Before Harold could respond, a well-dressed man in a tailored suit hurried over. His hair was slicked back, his shoes shone like mirrors, and he looked like he'd just been pulled from an important meeting. He stopped in front of them, face tight with anxiety. "Mr. Reeves," he said quickly, voice hushed but urgent. "I had no idea you were here, and I am so deeply sorry for what just occurred. That is not how we treat guests. Not ever." Ah, now Harold remembered the name. Keanu Reeves, the actor. The one people always said was too nice to be famous. Harold had never paid much attention to Hollywood, but he'd heard stories about how he gave away millions, rode the subway alone, treated waiters like family. He'd always thought those were just rumors. But sitting here, watching the way this man carried himself, no ego, no performance, Harold believed them. Keanu didn't stand up or make a show of it. He stayed seated, keeping eye level with Harold. "This gentleman came in with respect," he said to the manager. "He was met with disrespect. That's on you to fix." The manager nodded rapidly. "Absolutely, of course. Sir," he said, turning to Harold, "please accept my sincerest apologies. We will handle this properly." Right away. But Keanu held up a hand. Not just an apology, a real solution. "He came to return something that belongs to your brand. Let's treat it like it matters because it does to him." The manager swallowed hard. Yes, of course." He turned to go, but Keanu added one more thing, quiet but firm. "And make sure the person who did this understands why it was wrong. Not just for policy's sake, but for people's sake." The manager left, already barking orders into a small radio at his wrist. Harold watched it all unfold, stunned. He'd expected to be ignored, maybe even thrown out. Instead, a stranger, someone with every reason to look the other way, had stepped in not for attention, but because it was the right thing to do. "I don't know how to thank you," Harold said finally. Keanu shook his head. "You don't have to. I've been on the other side of that kind of look, the one that says you don't belong. It hurts. And it's never true." He paused, then added, "Your hands built something real. That's worth more than any watch in this store." Harold felt his eyes sting. He looked down, blinking fast. When he looked up again, Keanu was watching him with that same steady kindness. No fanfare, no camera-ready smile. Just a human being seeing another. Outside, the city kept rushing by. Cars honked, people hurried, the world moved on. But inside that quiet corner of the luxury store, time slowed. And for the first time in a long while, Harold didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, and sometimes that's enough to change everything. The store manager returned faster than Harold expected. This time he wasn't alone. Behind him walked another man, older with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a crisp white lab coat over a button-down shirt. He carried himself like someone used to handling delicate things. Not just watches, but moments, too. His hands were steady, his steps quiet. "Sir," the manager said, voice softer now, almost humble. "This is our head horologist. He'll personally examine the timepiece and process your request with full respect." The older man nodded politely. "May I?" he asked, holding out his hands gently. Not demanding, just offering. Harold hesitated only a second before handing over the velvet box. It felt strange letting it go again, but there was something trustworthy in the way the man held his gaze. Like he understood this wasn't just metal and glass, but memory. The horologist opened the box carefully as if handling a sleeping bird. He lifted the watch with 2 fingers, turned it slowly under the light, then used a small magnifying lens to inspect the engraving on the back. He didn't rush. He didn't sigh or roll his eyes. He just worked, quiet and precise. After a minute, he looked up. "This is a limited edition from 1987, rare. Never been worn, as you said. The movement is pristine. And yes, it was sold through our flagship store in New York." He glanced at the manager. "We can absolutely accept this return. In fact, given its condition and rarity, we can offer a full refund based on current market value, not original purchase price." Harold blinked. "But I don't have a receipt," the horologist smiled faintly. "Some things don't need paper to be true." The manager cleared his throat. "We'd also like to offer our deepest apology, sir. What happened earlier was unacceptable. It won't happen again." Harold didn't say anything right away. He looked over at the corner where Keanu still sat, arms resting on his knees, watching without interfering. He wasn't playing hero. He wasn't taking credit. He was just there, making sure things were made right. Then from the main counter, a voice broke the quiet. I didn't mean... It was the young woman, Chloe. She stood a few steps away, eyes red, voice shaky. I thought, I didn't know. Keanu stood slowly. He didn't tower over her, but his presence filled the space. You didn't know what? He asked, not angry, just firm. That he might be someone's grandfather? That he might have spent his life growing the food you eat? That he might be carrying grief you can't see? She looked down, tears welling. I was having a bad day. I didn't think... Bad days don't give us the right to hurt people, Keanu said gently. Especially not the ones who've already carried more than most. Harold watched her. He saw the shame, the regret. He remembered being young, making mistakes, thinking the world owed him something. He sighed. Look, he said, his voice rough but kind. I ain't looking for punishment. I just wanted to be treated like a person. That's all. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Really sorry. Keanu gave her a small nod. Now you know better. Next time, choose better. The manager quickly stepped in. Chloe will be taking a mandatory sensitivity training, and she'll be writing a formal letter of apology, not just to you, but to our team about the values we're supposed to uphold. Harold didn't care about the letter, but he appreciated the effort. More than that, he appreciated that someone had stood up, not with shouting, not with threats, but with quiet strength. The horologist handed him a form to sign. The refund amount listed made Harold's breath catch. It was more than he'd hoped for. Enough to fix the irrigation system, pay off the feed supplier, maybe even get that new roof he'd been putting off for 2 winters. As he signed with a shaky hand, Keanu walked over and stood beside him, not too close, just near enough to offer silent support. You did the right thing coming here, Keanu said softly. I almost didn't, Harold admitted. Felt out of place the whole drive. Places like this, Keanu said, glancing around at the gleaming cases and soft lighting. They're built for people with money. But dignity? That's free, and it belongs to everyone. Harold looked at him. You're not like most famous folks, are you? Keanu almost smiled. I'm just a guy who got lucky. But luck doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just gives you a chance to do better. They stood there for a moment in comfortable silence. Outside, the city buzzed on, but inside, something had shifted. The air felt lighter, like a storm had passed. Before Harold left, the manager handed him a thick envelope. Cash, as requested, no bank run needed. And, he added, we'd be honored if you'd consider this store a place you can return to any time. Not as a customer, but as a guest. Harold tucked the envelope into his inside pocket, right over his heart. I'll remember that, he said. As he turned to go, Keanu walked with him toward the door. Not to show him out like a servant, but like a friend seeing another friend off. Where's your farm? Keanu asked as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Couple hours west, near the river bend. Got 30 acres of wheat, a few cows, and a stubborn old mule named Bess. Keanu nodded. Sounds like peace. It is, Harold said. Most days. They stopped at the curb. Harold's truck sat parked under a streetlight, looking out of place among the sleek sedans, but proud in its own way. One more thing, Keanu said, reaching into his coat. He pulled out a small notepad and pen, scribbled something quickly, then tore out the page. He handed it to Harold. If you ever need help, real help, not just with watches, call this number. It's a friend of mine. Works with farmers. Gets grants, equipment, medical support for folks who've spent their lives working the land. Harold took the paper. It wasn't flashy. Just a name, a phone number, and a short note. Tell them Keanu sent you. I don't know what to say, Harold murmured. Say you'll take care of yourself, Keanu replied. And keep planting, Harold nodded. He opened the truck door, then paused. You ever been on a farm? Not enough, Keanu said with a small smile. Then you're invited. Anytime. We don't got marble floors, but we got fresh eggs and sunset views that'll steal your breath. Keanu's eyes softened. I might just take you up on that. Harold climbed in, started the engine. As he pulled away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Keanu was still standing there, hands in his pockets, watching the truck go. Not waving, not posing, just standing in the quiet dignity of a man who knew that kindness didn't need an audience. Back on the highway, Harold drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the envelope in his pocket. The city faded behind him, replaced by open fields and wide sky. He didn't feel small anymore. He felt seen, respected, human, and sometimes that's worth more than any watch in the world. The drive home felt different this time. Lighter somehow. Harold kept one hand on the steering wheel, and the other resting on the envelope in his coat pocket, as if making sure it was still real. The city's noise faded behind him, replaced by the steady hum of tires on open road and the occasional call of a hawk circling high above the fields. He rolled down the window just enough to let in the smell of dry grass and distant rain, smells that meant home. When he pulled into his driveway, dust kicked up in slow swirls behind the truck. The old farmhouse stood quiet, paint peeling in places, porch sagging just a little, but solid. Always solid. Bess the mule lifted her head from the fence line and let out a soft snort, like she'd been waiting. Harold gave her a tired wave. Inside, he set the envelope on the kitchen table, right next to the framed photo of his wife. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he poured himself a glass of water, sat down, and just breathed. For the first time in months, the knot in his chest had loosened. Later that evening, after feeding the animals and checking the water pump, he called the number Keanu had given him. A woman answered on the second ring, warm voice, no-nonsense tone. She listened as Harold explained who he was, where he was from, and why he was calling. She didn't interrupt. Didn't ask for proof or paperwork right away. Just said, "Tell me what you need." Harold hesitated. "Well, the well's acting up, and the tractor's on its last leg. Plus, I've been putting off a doctor's visit. Knees ain't what they used to be." There was a pause. Then she said, "We can help with all of that." Over the next few days, things began to move faster than Harold thought possible. A representative from a nonprofit that supported aging farmers came out to the property, not in a fancy car, but in a dusty pickup just like his. They walked the fields together, looked at the irrigation lines, checked the barn roof, and even sat on the porch drinking iced tea while talking about crop rotation and soil health. Within a week, Harold received word. A grant had been approved to repair his well system and replace key parts of his aging equipment. Not a loan, not a handout with strings. Just help, quiet, practical, and respectful. Then came the medical part. The nonprofit connected him with a rural health program that sent a nurse practitioner to his home for a checkup. She listened to his knees creak, checked his blood pressure, and arranged for him to get proper orthotics and physical therapy, covered in full. "You've earned this care," she told him gently. "Don't feel guilty for accepting it." Harold didn't cry, not exactly. But when he hung up the phone after confirming his first therapy appointment, he stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring out the window at the sunset. His wife would have liked this. She always said kindness came around when you least expected it, like rain after a long drought. A few days later, a plain brown package arrived in the mail. No return address, just his name and farm address written in neat handwriting. Inside was a simple wooden box. Lifting the lid, Harold found a handwritten note on thick paper. "Your hands built this country. Never let anyone make you feel small." Beneath it lay a small, smooth river stone, gray with streaks of white, cool to the touch. Nothing fancy, but it felt like an anchor, like a reminder. He placed it on the windowsill above the sink where the morning light would hit it first thing. Every day since, he'd glance at it while washing his hands or making coffee. It didn't fix the world, but it reminded him he wasn't alone in it. Back in the city, word of what happened at the luxury store began to spread, not through tabloids or gossip sites, but through quiet conversations. A customer who'd witnessed the whole thing told a friend, who told a local reporter. Soon, a small feature appeared in a regional paper. Elderly farmer receives unexpected aid after store incident. Harold never mentioned Keanu by name. He just said, "A kind stranger helped me when I needed it most." But people connected the dots. Photos from that day, grainy, taken on a phone, showed a familiar face in the background watching, then stepping forward. When a journalist finally tracked Keanu down for comment, he simply said, "I didn't do anything special. I just saw someone being treated unfairly and asked for it to stop. That's not heroism, that's basic decency." Still, the story touched people. Letters started arriving at Harold's farm. Not fan mail, but notes from other farmers, teachers, truck drivers, nurses. People who'd been made to feel less than because of their clothes, their age, their job. They thanked him for reminding them that dignity isn't bought, it's carried. Harold read every one. Some he pinned to the fridge, others he tucked into his Bible. All of them mattered. One afternoon, while fixing a fence post, he got a call from the non-profit again. "We've got good news," the woman said. "Because of your case, we're expanding our outreach. We're starting a new fund just for older farmers facing hardship, and we'd like to name it after you if you're okay with that." Harold was quiet for a long moment. "After me?" he finally asked. "I'm just a man with dirt under his nails." "That's exactly why," she said. "People need to see that value isn't in what you wear or how much you earn. It's in showing up day after day and doing the work," he agreed. And so, the Harold Jenkins Rural Resilience Fund was born, not with a gala or press conference, but with a handshake over a kitchen table and a promise to help others the way he'd been helped. Meanwhile, life on the farm settled into a new rhythm. The repaired well gushed clean water for the first time in years. The new tractor parts arrived, and with help from a neighbor's grandson, Harold got the old machine running smoother than it had in a decade. Even his knees felt better after a few therapy sessions. One evening, as he sat on the porch watching fireflies blink over the wheat field, he pulled out the note from Keanu again. He read it slowly, then folded it carefully and put it back in his wallet, right behind his wife's photo. He didn't know if he'd ever see that kind stranger again. But he didn't need to. What mattered was the ripple, the quiet chain of decency that started with one person choosing to see another, truly see them, and act. And Harold? He made a promise to himself right then. If ever he saw someone being treated like they didn't belong, he'd speak up too. Not loudly, not for show, just because it was right. Because kindness, once given, doesn't end. It grows, like wheat, like hope, like the roots of an old tree, deep, strong, and meant to last.